All right, we can go ahead and get started. So, thank you all very much for joining us today to discuss modernizing your data architecture for successful paid media ROI, focusing really on data privacy as well as insights. A lot of good content for us to jump into. First, to kind of start off a little bit of housekeeping and then also a little bit of just who we are. So on the housekeeping front, we are holding a little bit of time at the end. So if you have any questions as we're going through the content, there should be a little Q&A panel. Please, please, please do drop in your questions into that and we will answer those live at the end. We want this to be conversational, interactive. We really want you to get value out of this. So definitely, please ask anything that you're curious about. Now, beyond that, just who we are, before we get into all of the great content, I can kick it off. My name is Lucas. I am the head of global privacy strategy at InfoTrust. And then I'm joined also by my colleague, Michael. Let him introduce himself.
Nice to meet everybody. My name is Michael, and I'm a senior media consultant at InfoTrust.
Wonderful. And InfoTrust, who we are a privacy-centric marketing organization. We help organizations really at that intersection of privacy, data strategy, as well as architecture. So you can see on there, we are Google partners as well as sales partners, really focusing on the technology stack, helping you get stood up with those different platforms, licensing, as well as privacy-centric data collection. Also thrilled to be joined by Adam and Ryan from Found. I'll let you all go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. So my name's Ryan Emy. I'm the head of data intelligence at Found Search Marketing. A little about me, I've been in the performance marketing space for about 20 years, both in-house and agency side. I've been with Found for 14. I'm a certified Google Cloud engineer and lead our team of data engineers, architects, and scientists. A little about our company. So Found Search Marketing, we're a data engineering marketing agency. And we're entering into our 20th year since being established. We were established and are still being led by former Google AdWords employees. And as you can see there, we're a certified Google Marketing Platform partner, a Google Cloud Service partner, and hold ad platform partnerships as well, such as Google Ads partner, Microsoft Ads Elite partner. Our main goal through these partnerships is deliver best-in-class data and marketing services to our clients. I'll pass it over to Adam, and he can introduce himself and go a little bit more into the type of work Found does.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Persinger. I'm the head of strategic media at Found Search Marketing. I've been at Found for 10 years and I've been in the marketing world a little more. My main focus at the agency is to make sure we're constantly testing up and coming products, improving how we work with different businesses and clients to produce measurable business outcomes. At our agency, we focus heavily on performance marketing, particularly in the lead gen space. We work with clients that have all sorts of data pipelines, varying sales cycles, different levels of tech sophistication. Our job is to take the tools you have, maximize them, and continuously push for better infrastructure to support growth. Lucas?
Yeah, thank you very much. So obviously a lot of experience, a lot of brain power here to walk you through some really good topics today, which we are super excited to jump into. So just to quickly give a little bit of a rundown of what to expect. So first section, we'll focus on the current state. What are a lot of the challenges that we're seeing in the market? What are a lot of the things that we know you're facing as marketers today? And then, why some of those things matter. We'll then shift gears a little bit to discuss and walk through how to prepare your organization, what needs to be in place, and what are some of the best practices in order to be able to meet and exceed those challenges that you're facing today. And then finally, we get much more kind of practical for how to apply. So how to apply various different strategies, what are the things to really focus on, and how to make those things work for your business. So as we go through all of this, The goal here is to be the most educational, helpful hour of your week, and help you walk away here with a few key takeaways. So, understanding how is it that privacy constraints can impact media performance? What are some of the latest and greatest as it relates to data privacy as well as platform changes? How to strengthen your data architecture in order to be able to address those things and improve your results as well as attribution. And then hopefully you can walk away with all of that with a plan in order to be able to operationalize a lot of those changes. And you can start Monday morning with a lot of great new ideas and a new plan in order to be able to execute. So lofty goals, we know, especially the the most helpful hour, but we're here to target for them. So to start out, current state, kind of where are we right now? And the biggest challenge that we see for a lot of different marketers is related to signal loss and privacy changes. So there's all kinds of technical restrictions that are restricting the ways in which data can be collected. There's also broader platform changes for some of their legal and regulation obligations related to privacy, which again makes it more difficult for marketers to be able to collect and leverage data. And then also organizations have obligations that are placed upon them, one from the expectations of their users with respect to privacy, but then also in that legal regulatory space that you need to be aware of. And some of those obligations, things like consent and opt-out requirements, those have a meaningful impact on the nature of the data that you're able to collect, and thus the downstream impact also on the data that you're able to use for effective marketing. Beyond, yeah, signal loss, it also gets into some broader changes, which I know Adam can speak to here.
Yeah, so everybody is probably sick of hearing of AI every day. It's in the news, but it's here. It's here to stay, and it's changing every single day. And who's at the center of all these AI advancements? It's companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, Twitter, all these places that you probably have some sort of media presence. It's all the tech advertising giants. It's no wonder that these advancements are rapidly moving into the advertising world. The one thing that all these AI platforms run on is your data. So figuring out how to collect more of it in a better way is going to be your key differentiator to having the best marketing and advertising plan that you can implement.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, the graphics I think do a great job of illustrating your point. Volume challenges related to signal loss and privacy, but then with AI, which all runs on the data that is collected, where quality becomes incredibly, incredibly important. Cool. So beyond what is happening, why do these things matter?
And that's a good point that, Lucas and Adam touched on it. On one side, you have privacy and browser restrictions that are reducing the signal strength. And on the other side, now more than ever, you need more data and signal depth than ever. So these are fundamental changes that are happening. And so, why do these matter to, marketers and executives? The reasons kind of listed out here are pretty closely related and intertwined. But first off, you could be leaving revenue on the table. So spending money to generate leads or sales with a lower LTV or a lower propensity to convert in the first place means that you're potentially losing or using your ad dollars rather to chase a less than ideal customer instead of your ideal one, meaning that you're missing out on more revenue. And competition can also be a factor here too. So if your competitors are using their data better, they could be squeezing you out of areas that could be potentially more profitable for you because your performance is lacking there. And that the second point there, you could be sacrificing performance. So the quality of your performance is becoming more and more directly tied to the quality of your signals. And if you're sending bad or incomplete signals, the algorithms are not going to be optimizing the way that they should. They're optimizing on weaker inputs. And then lastly, with potentially inaccurate granularity and attribution into how your initiatives are performing, more money could really be going into inefficient campaigns where you're chasing after leads that don't convert. And this means wasted ad spend at the end of the day. And over time, these problems can just compound. Um, so we're operating in a new reality, and how do we shift to the new norm and prepare for the certain changes that are continuing to impact the industry? We can go on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So how to prepare? First and foremost, while accurate and complete data is extremely important, you have to do it the right way, ensuring that you're being compliant from a legal perspective, and that you're respecting your users' consent. You need to build trust and retain your customers' trust in your brand at the end of the day. The second is moving to server-side technologies. So we'll get into this a little bit more shortly, but the move to server-side isn't just about preserving pixel functionality. It's more about aligning your infrastructure with how modern platforms are actually operating, um, and that requires or is moving to require more durable signals, richer signals, and revenue aligned signals. And that's how media platforms benefit at the end of the day, and how your marketing results are going to benefit as a result. But Lucas, I'll hand it back over to you. You can dive more into our first point around privacy and consent.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan made a great point there in starting with the privacy and consent piece and mentioning kind of how it's an obligation for some of those different legal requirements, which is absolutely true. At the same time, privacy is an expectation for consumers. Ryan mentioned the point about trust. Everything that we're doing with consumers is all underscored by trust. If there is not a trusting relationship, the consumer is not going to provide data to you. They're not going to fill out that full lead form. They're not going to give an accurate company name when submitting for more information about your product. So that is where consent and privacy really come into play. So when thinking about some of the different essentials here, one, kind of prefacing this, full well knowing not every organization may have the legal obligation for consent on the website. Know that in the United States, for US comprehensive state privacy laws, of which there are 19 that are now passed across the US, many of those do have minimum thresholds for the size of the organization, the volume of personal data that is being processed, as well as the revenue figures for an organization. So even while this may not be an obligation for every organization, it goes back to what I mentioned for consumer expectations. Build trust, give consumers the rights, the abilities to interact with your brand, with your website in a private manner. And so things that means is for many organizations is a cookie banner or some kind of notice at the very least to be able to provide transparency into what is being collected and why is it being used. Make that understandable for the user. As a part of that, allowing for opt-out and preference management settings and make that easy for the consumer. Ideally, in a way in which they're able to manage those settings, one for opting out of the legal obligations of sale share on your website, but also for the different types of marketing preferences that they prefer to be contacted and to be aware of. There's also the point in here, which is a little bit more of a technical nuance for Google Consent Mode via GTM. Consent mode is something that allows you to better control the nature of data and the types of cookies and the purposes for which Google tags are collecting information. Um, it's also a technical requirement, and this goes back to some of Google's legal obligations. And so, to accurately and properly collect information with those Google platforms, you really need to focus on and make sure that even if you're not using things like advanced consent modes, that the foundation is there so that you can have all the data available for all of the various different activation purposes. So I mentioned in terms of the considerations for the requirements, um, individual requirements across those various different 19 states that I mentioned. It's always best practice. Take the most restrictive when everything applies, and then apply those standards. Because it's not just US state privacy laws in the US or comprehensive state privacy laws, those 19. There are also individual sector specific, depending upon types of data that are potentially being collected and processed by your organization. So get that foundation in place at least. Clear transparency, clear disclosure, giving users those options as it relates to the types of data that you're collecting from them, the types of processing and purposes for using that, as well as options for how you're communicating and what you're communicating with them. Now, that's going to form a solid foundation for upon which all data collection is built. But here, I want to kind of kick it over back to Ryan to speak a little bit to the next level of that technical kind of configuration in order to be able to optimize for complete data collection.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. And that's the server-side architecture that we're talking about. So client-side tracking was built for a simpler era, essentially. But things like consent banners and honoring do not track, the kinds of things that Lucas talked about, in addition to sophisticated things like ad blockers, other things like third-party cookie deprecation and Safari and Firefox tracking prevention policies. It just means that browser-based pixels have become increasingly unreliable. These things can compress cookie lifespans and block scripts entirely. So in practical terms, your remarketing list could shrink, your conversion events don't fire, algorithms get weaker signals. So you're investing the same amount of media dollars and the pressure for performance is still on, but the optimization engine isn't, it's really flying partially blind. So the industry has already started the shift to a server-side tracking setup, which is built more for an AI era. And at a high level, it does several things. It can stabilize your signal flow, increase your signal richness, and then close the loop and connect downstream revenue back into the optimization engine. So when you combine durable signals, enriched data, and this closed loop system, you're starting to optimize less for leads and more optimizing for revenue. And that's what we're trying to correct. We're trying to move to this so we can decrease wasted spend and stabilize performance over time. So getting into the move to server side, it's is essentially kind of shifting control. We're going to discover here how server side presents several opportunities to help improve your paid media performance. So instead of the browser sending data directly to the ad platforms, your events flow to your server first, where you can filter data and transform it, enrich it. So it's really an architectural change. It's not just a tagging update. But let's kind of translate that into the performance impact. So first off, stronger tracking signals. So because tracking originates from your server environment, you're reducing signal loss and extending first-party cookie durability. And that has an impact across the board, not just limited to things like improving your remarketing pools and targeting audiences. But since your server-side events are also more resilient than browser-only pixels, this also helps with improved conversion capture. So that translates to more accurate conversion metrics in the platform, better algorithm training, more stable CPA performance over time, and not only improve conversion capture, but also improve conversion rates. So when you migrate certain tags to server side, the browser loads fewer third-party scripts, or one request can be distributed to multiple server-side tags. So in reducing browser clutter, and instead of, say, firing 10 pixels through client side, you have one structured event in your server that you can distribute efficiently to all these other platforms. And so what that does is decrease your page weight and improves load times. And so for mid to large brands, even small speed gains can materially improve conversion rates. Richer segments. So server side also allows you to append additional data before sending it to platforms. And this is a really powerful feature. So not only can you add in specific things like your own data, whether that's the customer tier or maybe the LTV brand that they fall into, lead score, things like that. But you can also integrate with other APIs to enrich your data with verified third-party data. So instead of just sending a plain conversion equals yes, you're kind of sending a conversion equals yes, and it's a high value segment customer and has a projected LTV of 10K. So it unlocks certain things like value-based bidding and advanced optimization. Accurate attribution. So you'll basically be getting more accurate attribution with improved durability and fewer blocked events. So the journeys become more visible, assisted conversions stabilize. And this also means less dependency at the end of the day on aggressive modeling. So machine learning is obviously getting stronger, used more, but with browser signals getting weaker, some platforms are using more advanced modeling to kind of fill in those gaps. So it's helpful, but of course, it's not always going to be 100% accurate. So by implementing server-side tracking, you'll reduce that need for as much modeled data. You're still going to get modeled data, but it's no longer filling in massive gaps. But one thing I do want to highlight here, I want to be clear, server-side tracking is not a silver bullet, where as soon as you implement, you're going to capture 100% of the signals out there and you can just move on. And it's not a total replacement for browser or client-side tracking either. And it's not a workaround for consent at all. So the best setups kind of use like a hybrid approach with client side and server side working together. So the client side captures user interactions and consent, and server side helps reduce the signal loss and validate and enrich the data, both being deduplicated properly. So obviously it has a lot of potential benefits. And if the direction of the ecosystem is moving this direction, so I guess the question becomes like, why move now? What can this do for your media platform? So, Michael, well, I'll pass it over to you, and you can dive into this more.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, really happy to expand on that a little bit. So we've kind of talked about signal loss, privacy changes, and the shift to server-side architecture. But the real question performance teams, usually ask themselves is, what does this actually do for paid media specifically? So let's translate the architecture into revenue impact. So as Ryan was kind of speaking to, server-side tagging isn't just a technical upgrade, but rather you can kind of think about it as a signal amplification strategy as well. And so when you kind of think about major media platforms, Google, Meta, TikTok, LinkedIn, they all run on algorithms. And so server-side architecture fundamentally improves how the media platforms receive, interpret, and also optimize your data. And in an AI-driven buying environment, signal quality is performance. So by moving the data collection to a controlled first-party server environment, marketers will regain control over identifiers, data persistence, and event delivery. So how does this translate to a measurable media impact? And I would say you could kind of break that down into a few critical areas where Ryan kind of touched on them quite a bit. So I'll kind of expand on the media perspective. So essentially, better signals you could think about as being equal to better optimization. So again, platforms like Google, Meta are now AI first, and manual optimization is kind of left in the dust. So these systems essentially live by signal quality. And so when browser tracking drops, conversions, it shortens cookies, or loses identifiers, the algorithm learns from essentially this kind of incomplete data set. And so increasingly, platforms are kind of forced to essentially model these conversions instead of measure them directly. And so server side would help restore signal integrity, where a little bit more of conversions are going to be captured, more parameters are going to be passed, longer attribution windows, and that means better learning faster. Additionally, richer data can be synonymous with smarter bidding. So with server side, you're kind of just not passing a conversion happen. But as Ryan was kind of speaking to, we could enrich this data in real time. So value tiers, propensity scores, marginal data, customer status, lots of other customizations as well. And so the algorithm stops optimizing for volume, and then it would start optimizing toward value. So this is kind of where we would see improvements across ROAS, CPA efficiencies, and incrementality. Another item would be reduced waste and clear management. So when signals are missing, platforms model. And model data is kind of directional and not precise. And so what this really means that platforms can really see is by who converted, which actions they took, what users are actually worth, and how to find more users like them. And one other key is improved user segmentation and targeting. So this helps deliver more personalized, impactful web experience based on user segmentation, where you can also gain deeper customer insights to drive strategy through advanced analysis. So what does this really mean? This isn't just restoring what was lost, but rather it's creating a more controlled, durable signal foundation than what we had before. It means less wasted spend, faster learning cycles, and media that scales profitably, not just efficiently. So server side enables better signals, smarter optimization, and more accurate measurement. And that directly translates to higher performing campaigns. And if you want to go to the next slide. And so at this point, performance marketing is essentially algorithm management. And so your results are directly tied to what the algorithm sees and what it's trained to optimize for. So your algorithm is only as intelligent as the data that you feed it. But here's where I feel a lot of practitioners kind of run into a little bit of trouble is that algorithms are incredibly good at achieving the goal you give them if you give them enough data. The problem, a lot of practitioners are essentially optimizing for proxy metrics. And so the algorithms essentially are optimizing perfectly, just perhaps not always for the right outcome. They're not flawed, but they are incredibly literal. And so some examples that you can think about for this is lead generation doesn't necessarily equal closed won revenue, and revenue doesn't always equal profit for lifetime value. So if we feed the algorithm incomplete or maybe even shallow conversion signals, it'll optimize toward those outcomes. So if you essentially tell Google to optimize to form fills, for example, you'll find people who love filling out forms, but not necessarily people who convert into customers. And if you optimize for revenue, it might prioritize large orders and not necessarily high lifetime value customers. So again, it's not flawed, but it's doing exactly what it should do. The limitation sometimes might be the signal. And so this is where server side essentially will change the game. And this, again, allows us to enrich this conversion data events in real time before they actually even hit the media platform. So instead of sending form submitted, you could potentially send a qualified lead, a sales accepted lead, close one customer, high lifetime value customer, or even profit revenue. And so the algorithm will optimize toward what truly drives a business, not what might just be on the surface. And so with that, the result are quite a few different benefits. So you get deduplicated signals, reduced fragmentation, value-based bidding at scale. Additionally, you would get improved match rates to increase observable conversions, which then would expand the algorithm's training data set. And lastly, but most important, from my point of view, is the improving of user targeting with more accurate first-party audiences. And in the Google ecosystem, we can that can mean passing enriched values to custom floodlight variables, power bidding strategies in SA360 and DV360. And essentially, when the algorithm learns from complete enriched durable signals, performance compounds, not just improves. So now I'll go ahead and pass it over to Ryan to speak a little bit on the implementation of server side.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So before we get started here, there is a spectrum of server-side solutions, and they come in different forms. What Michael was just kind of speaking to with the data enrichment and having that that may not apply to like this first one here. So I want to kind of call some of that out. Most people, when they think of server side, they kind of think of like a server side Google Tag Manager implementation or a similar tag management platform offering. But there are more solutions and offerings out there. So kind of breaking those down, Google Tag Gateway. So this is something that Google rolled out fairly recently at scale. And this is often the fastest entry point and something that organizations can roll out. Really just because of the ease of implementation that Google has made it through Google Tag Manager and a content delivery network like Cloudflare. It essentially acts as a proxy that routes your Google tracking tags through your own domain instead of a third-party Google domain. And that is by utilizing that CDN like Cloudflare. And because the browser sees a tag being set from your own domain and not a known tracking domain like Google Tag Manager, this can help your tags with actually firing and not being blocked outright. And this is important. Going back to what I said earlier, this isn't the same thing as like a full server-side tag management rollout. With Google Tag Gateway, you can't enrich data, you can't transform events, you can't control the payload structure, things like that. It's more of a lightweight improvement layer. And it's good for speed of deployment, but it's kind of limited in its flexibility. So there are some additional tools, the platform APIs, some examples of this is like Google Ads API, the Meta Conversions API, LinkedIn Conversions API. Most of these media platforms out there have some sort of conversions API that you can integrate with. And these allow your server to send conversion events directly to your platform. Typically, this is implemented in a hybrid format. So your browser pixel still will fire and will send those events to the platform, but your server does also. And then there's like a deduplication layer that ensures the platform is only counting one. So this really strengthens the reliability for web events. And not only web events, but also the data that's sent through CAPI can be done in a safe way. So you can control what's being sent via your server, how it's formatted, what attributes are included. So it kind of gets into data governance a little bit too. You're moving more from a passive observer of what's going to the platform into more like of an active gatekeeper of your customer data and what's being passed through. Server-side web tracking. This is specifically referring to what we've kind of talked about before, the web tracking client side to a server-side tracking implementation like server-side GTM. where you host a server tagging container. It's either self-managed or via different cloud services. There are tools like Pweek Pro, which is a tool that has like a tag management system built into it. There's Stape, Addingwell, Elevar. There's several tools out there, but they help operationalize this without a heavy data engineering lift on your side. And so here your server becomes more of that controlled data router that I was referring to earlier, where you can enrich the events, you can validate payloads, you can filter noise, things like that. And this has historically been more of an involved rollout, because it sometimes takes some additional tagging knowledge to be set up properly. But there are tools and platforms, like we mentioned earlier, that are making it easier to implement. And again, it's highly recommended to implement this type of solution. And the last part that marketing directors should really deeply care about, something a little more strategic, is the closed feedback loop. So what's possible through these server-side technologies is uploading offline events. So as Michael had mentioned earlier, when you're sending values through, you're sending propensity through, you're sending these additional values through with your events, it helps you and the platforms at the end of the day optimize for qualified leads, for revenue, for lifetime value, for renewal likelihood, like all these things that are deeply important to the business at the end of the day. So setting up a closed loop system can be a little bit more involved depending on your tech stack, but it's still very highly recommended to roll out for your campaigns, because that's when paid media transforms more into like a revenue aligned, conversion optimization machine. So like I said, server-side tracking is not about chasing pixels. It's modernizing how your signals are flowing through your organization and back to the platforms. So now that we've discussed like how to prepare and implement, Adam, you want to jump into how we can apply this?
Yeah, definitely. You all did a great job. Was very technical. Now I'm going to try to help you take all of this, if you're a marketing manager, and apply it to your campaigns and figure out how you can scale your business or the businesses that you work with. Lucas did a great job of talking about how you collect data in a privacy-centric way. Ryan talked about how you make that data signal robust and add in all sorts of things. Michael talked about how the ad platforms are using all of this data. So I'm coming from the perspective of, you did all this, your data signals are looking great. Now how do you implement these into your campaigns? And if you want to go to the first slide, Lucas. There's three main things that we found will impact how the platforms are using your signals. That's the volume of signals that you have, how quickly those signals are making it into your account, and what informative data is coming along with those signals. So obviously the goal is to have the most signals. They come into your account immediately, and you have every piece of revenue data tied with every event that you pass through. We know that that's not the real world. Businesses are fragmented, data is in different places. Some businesses have extremely long sales cycles. Some businesses have sales teams that aren't always updating data. So how do we make this chaos in real business work for you? What I would suggest, the first thing you do is map out that flow from an ad impression to a click all the way through to revenue, and mark out the main events that are leading to revenue. Work with your team, work with people like us to map each one of those events back and pass through accurate revenue predictors for those events, and then start to test. We've worked with all sorts of different businesses of different sizes, and you have to test consistently. Platforms are changing their capabilities, what information they're looking at. So test, test, test. You got to find the sweet spot for your business on how many signals you're giving the platform to use, what information you're passing through with those signals, and when those are coming. So the baseline for most platforms is they recommend 30 to 50 events per strategy for a month, and that signal needs to come in within 14 days. So if you have a long sales cycle and you're selling big ticket products and it might take 6 months, you're probably not going to be able to bid to revenue. So you have to find different events along the way that will predict whether that sale will happen and how valuable that sale will be, whether it is contacting a sales rep or talking on the phone or selecting a given product, or like they were saying, like who is the what's the job title of the individual. What are the different events and factors that you know about individuals along the way? So my suggestion is pass through each one of these events into your platforms and start testing. We've seen companies have thousands of signals and they might move farther away from a revenue event to a signal that has 10,000 events. And we found some businesses can optimize off of 10 very valuable signals a month. It all just depends, and you need to start testing and testing today. The other benefit of passing through all the different events that your business has along the way to a sale is all of these ad platforms are getting more and more advanced. Google's rolling out a product this quarter called Journey Action Bidding, where you pass through different signals and it uses its AI to weight different stages along the way. So you don't have to just bid to one. Facebook is rolling out a similar product. Things are changing. You want to make sure you have, as a marketer, all the data at your fingertips ready to go and test. Once you've figured out where along the sales funnel is your sweet spot for your business, you need to define different characteristics at that event that will give you an indication of, is this user more likely to become a sale or not? And if they are going to become a sale, is there a differentiator that says this will be a more valuable user or a less valuable user? So what could that be? That could be their company size, their job title, something they selected in the lead form, a product they were interested in, and then start to build propensity models that will predict the lifetime value of that user. My recommendation would be to start simple. Start with one thing that you know at that event and pass differentiating values on that one variable. You know, once you get that working, you can work with different advanced vendors to enrich your data at that stage. You can do advanced propensity modeling based off of characteristics that the user took on your website or who they are. But start simple, find something that can better predict value than where you were yesterday. And what does this do? This allows you to be comfortable with the next dollar you'll spend, to have an expectation on the return that you'll get. When your data signals are strong, like everyone was talking, there's less modeling going on. So you don't have to say, oh, if I scale by 20%, all these ad platforms are just going to find lower quality leads. You're passing back to the algorithm in real time what's valuable or not, so you can trust the system to grow. Also, passing in that data, having a clean data architecture, capturing it all, allows you to use MMM models or different attribution models and advanced reporting that give you a better view of how your media is actually performing. So what does this unlock and what is this going to help you do? I think once you've found that sweet spot in your data pipeline that you want to bid to, you're passing back good values. it really unlocks targeting like never before. So for a long time, good advertising agencies could outsmart their competitors by building massive keyword lists and having teams of people go through negative lists, and you have hyper precise like targeting on Facebook or LinkedIn. You really know your target demographic. In the short term, that's still kind of viable, and all this data is going to help improve those tactics. But very quickly, that's going to be a losing strategy. These ad platforms, with their use of AI, like Michael was saying, it's all the information that you put in that's telling you who to target. They're taking away your ability to select certain audiences. If you've been in Google Ads, you know that matching is no longer really a thing. A keyword's going to match with anything. PMAX, they're taking away keywords altogether. So the only thing that these ad platforms have to go off of is if you tell it this is what's valuable to my company. Your data is now your targeting layer. And then I know some people are scared of these black box tools that all the ad platforms are coming out, but they are very powerful tools that can unlock scale that you didn't know before. So you have things like Advantage Plus in Facebook. That's where you essentially remove the targeting restrictions that you give it and let Facebook go find users that you give conversion and value signals to. AI Max, you don't give it keywords anymore. It goes on intent based on what the user has been searching in the past. This is very helpful as LLMs become bigger, search terms get longer. PMAX will optimize between different types of media, but don't really show you what's happening. So you have to trust that the data signal that you're providing for these ad systems to optimize off of is true and accurate. Like I always tell the clients that I work with, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you just tell it to optimize to a low quality signal, it's going to pass back tons and tons of those low quality signals at a very high rate. I like what you said, Michael, earlier. I thought that was a very good point. But in the end, AI is coming and we have to adjust. And the main driver of being able to use this AI is your own data. It's going to allow you to consolidate campaigns and tactics into smaller groups just focused on what's providing revenue. You don't have to have as big a teams combing through keyword list, making audience sizes. You can focus more on how do I differentiate my product from the competitors? How do I find and curate my data signals for more intent at each stage? And you could really scale your business if you dive in deep to the data and get it cleaned up. So I know we're running short on time here. We made it seem fairly simple, but we know in the real world there's tons of structural barriers preventing this from happening. I mean, it all makes sense. We want to collect our data in a privacy-centric way. Everybody wants as many signals as they can. Everybody wants to bid to revenue, but lots of times in big businesses, there's all sorts of roadblocks in the way to make this happen. So we wanted to spend the last few minutes kind of talking on how we can talk to different people within your company, within the companies that you work with, on how to break down those barriers and get moving on this sort of implementation.
Yeah, so in terms of some of those structural barriers, and we can start with the first here, in just the problem awareness. So understanding what is the problem, who cares, who's going to own these different things, who's going to be impacted. Getting that clarity up front is one of the things that we often see really across organizations. I think for all of us, having that clarity, having that awareness is the number one kind of initial top driver. From there, then, once we identify the problem, who has bought in, who's really championing the solution, stakeholder mapping throughout that entire life cycle. I mean, we've talked about the initial foundation. What are our privacy obligations? What are our privacy? How do we want to show up for our customers? All the way through the technical aspects, all the way through the execution, all the way through the media strategy. There's a lot of different stakeholders that are involved in this entire process. And so making sure that we understand who is each individual, what is it that they are going to be owning in the process, what is it that they're going to be asking about, and really get that team together cross-functionally in order to be able to go and attack these problems. Speaking to cross-functional alignment, bringing all of those stakeholders together. So sharing different knowledge, sharing different solutions. One thing that on the privacy side I often see is folks in the marketing side looking at folks that are bringing privacy considerations to the table as the enemy. It's like, you don't want me to be able to collect as much data. It's like, no, everyone is in this together. We're all working to the same outcome, to the same goal, getting everyone on the same page. At the same time, understanding for whatever obligation there is, there's always some kind of a trade-off. So being clear in communication as to what those things are to be able to set expectations. And then the last aspect of this is a lot of these things are difficult. It's easy for us to sit here for, an hour and talk about what you should be doing and what is the best practice, full well knowing that there is effort involved in getting a lot of these things stood up. And that's where, where there are areas where you might not be an expert in the space or where you do need help, identifying who are the partners that are able to help in order to be able to bring that internal vision to a reality and support those internal teams, the internal teams that you have, in order to be able to supplement one, any kind of knowledge gaps, but then two, any kind of technical, execution gaps. And also understanding that partners like Found, like InfoTrust, we do this stuff every day. So what we so often run into with organizations that are struggling is they get into things and they don't know, it's the unknown unknowns. When you don't know what you don't know and don't know the gotchas when going through any type of a process, that's where really partners are able to help a lot. So to kind of bring everything together and to summarize, so we mentioned we wanted you all to be able to walk away with some very operational, specific takeaways. Hopefully, a lot of this content is giving you strategies to consider and to start really building out that roadmap in your plan. But also, just to remember a few takeaways here. Number one, all of these changes are happening. They're happening for everyone. So it's important that we have to do something. With that have to do, just as Ryan talked about the different kind of evolutions or options available for server side, start simple, progress gradually, see some wins, get some wins, then move on to the next stage. So when we're thinking about the data collection, first focusing on ensuring accuracy, then doing a lot of the things that Michael talked about in data enhancement and integration across different systems, address attribution issues so that when you have that feedback loop and piping in that data that Adam was talking about, all of that is clean, all of that is accurate, and you're optimizing to the right things. Increase the validity and the utility of those signals with known IDs and piping in that data, and then also importing your offline data that you have high confidence in that is a representation of your business in to enhance a lot of those different digital efforts. As mentioned, reach out to partners for help. We love helping. And I think it was Adam that mentioned testing is key. Platforms change, strategies change, your business environment changes. And it's important to test, always really focus on how is it that we can improve, what's working, what's not, and being able to enhance from there. So we have 5 minutes here. And I did promise at the outset that we would get into any customer questions in there, or sorry, any attendee questions. And there have been a couple. The first one that I'll kind of open up to the group is just what kind of improvements can be expected by moving to this type of a setup. We've talked about, some of the architecture pieces. I think this came in kind of around there. So maybe Ryan, I'll kick it to you. You spoke to some of those improvements related to server side. But what's the utility? What's the expectation? What is it that end state that someone could expect?
Yeah, I think, and again, it may kind of depend on the scope, or like what type of solution you're implementing. Kind of like what you mentioned about like where you're starting can impact like what you're going to see. But typically, what you will end up seeing, even with just Google Tag Gateway, is you'll start to see more signals in the platform. So basically, it's just giving you more data to work off of at the end of the day. And as mentioned earlier, that can help with from like an audience perspective, and how you are utilizing those in your campaigns, as well as any of the analysis that you're doing as well. More complete data means better analysis at the end of the day. So when you're going through and trying to figure out what is driving the most business impact at the end of the day, that more complete picture that you have from better data signals will help. When you get into more of like the enrichment side of things, that's when it really opens up a lot from an optimization standpoint, and again, kind of giving those AI driven platforms and campaigns more to work off of and better data to work off of. So you can really expect just better campaign performance and better, return on ad spend at the end of the day, because you're feeding it more of the signals that you want it to optimize to at the end of the day.
Cool. All right, I think we have time for one more. And this one I'll kick over to either Michael or Adam, or maybe combination of both. But kind of on the operational side, what internal stakeholders often kind of push back the most, or are there the most challenges with as it relates to standing up some of these data initiatives related to the media activation side?
I can give one example here. I know for quite a few of the businesses that we work with, the finance team is very hesitant to give over any revenue data, any lifetime value data, and it makes it hard when, as a marketing team, you're really pushing to use this data to better inform signals. Um, so I think it takes time to build up that trust in what you can do with it. And I like to work with companies to just get proxy values for different products they have and different lifetime values they have, just relative value between different services. And then you can start like just set a rough estimate on what the lifetime value is. And the platforms just need the difference between the different products they have, and then start to implement that, and then show how much more efficiency that you can get out of your ad campaign when you start to pass in any sort of value, whether it's the truth or not. And then kind of once you can prove out that passing through a value is really improving ROAS and is improving revenue capabilities, is unlocking all of these tools, then you start to hear more from like the finance team, like, oh, what is marketing doing that's having this positive impact? And then they're more willing to share. But I get where the finance teams come from. Like if you're working with a new marketing partner, you're starting a new initiative, like why am I going to share all this data? But you got to show that it's worth it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just adding real quick, I definitely would concur with all Adam said as well. And one thing I wanted to mention too with that is kind of like the unknown, right? So this is kind of like pretty technical in the weeds, lots of different configurations. And I think like just having a really solid foundational and understanding of what exactly you might be doing, what does that kind of mapping look like? And one kind of way you could look at that is leaning on your partners, right? Where as Lucas mentioned, we're kind of doing this every day in the weeds, so we're happy to walk through any of those conversations, and kind of help, our customers or prospects, formalize what way that they can kind of move best forward. So like an example of, we've all familiar with cookie deprecation, right? So an important thing I think that is really misunderstood is technically it's like third party cookies, not first party. And there's like a really big mix up in the industry, and people think like all complete cookies are going away. And also people, I think, don't really understand cookies are just like one of the many signals. So kind of speaking with the server side and enriching these signals and all of those types of things, I think really having the understanding of the unknown and how to communicate that, kind of tying it back to finance, because with my experience that is kind of a little bit of a hurdle as well, for fair enough reasons for sure. But I think really understanding the full grasp and having that mapped, then just kind of poking around in the dark would be super helpful to understand to move forward on this.
Amazing. Well, hopefully, no one in the audience is still left in the unknown as far as where we stand today, what is most important, and then how you can begin moving forward. So, thank you all very, very much for joining us here today. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, hope to chat again later. Thank you all.